She sent me an email being like, Lena and we're talking. We thought everybody should sit.
We're starting.
Right.
Okay. Hello and welcome. Sorry we're a bit late. We're having some technological difficulties. This is the third Shit Harper Did webinar. My name is Lila Darwish and I'm the webinar host. And we are going to be talking about how to take direct action to support the refugees welcome mobilizations that are happening around the country. And we have two really great migrant justice organizers with us today to talk about that. We have Tings Chak and Syed Hussan. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for
Hi, I'm
having
going to
us.
say a little bit about you, and then we're going to kind of get into it. Tings Chak is a multidisciplinary artist and migrant justice organizer with Known as Illegal in Toronto, and Syed Hussan is a community organizer, writer, and poet who is also with Known as Illegal, as well as the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change and Solidarity City Network, which has been working to make Toronto a sanctuary city. So we are going to be covering in this webinar more about the refugee crisis and the kind of creative actions we can take, especially since we are in about 25 days till the election and there's a lot of opportunities to turn up the heat. And I guess I'm going to turn it over to you guys for the rest of the webinar. Are you ready?
Totally.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I guess first of all, maybe just tell folks who are listening a bit about yourself and about Known as Illegal.
Yeah, cool. So we both organize with Known as Legal Toronto. It's a grassroots all-volunteer organization.
No,
Yes,
I agree. Let's go.
Of migrants and allies. So our primary work is in three areas. We are opposed to all detentions and deportations of migrants. We are working around, you already mentioned in the bio, around Solidarity City, access without fear, which basically means that people without immigration status should be able to live dignified lives, access essential services. And then we also ground our work in solidarity with Indigenous sovereignty movements as a basis of talking about colonization, displacement, a lot of things we'll talk about today. So we've been here as, I guess, one of the groups that have been helping with the refugees welcome mobilizations and providing a bit of leadership and support for a lot of the cities that I guess Hassan will talk a little bit about. But that's basically what we do.
Great.
Cool. Okay, I'll speak a bit about Refugees Welcome. So, Refugees Welcome is a mobilization that started after, hundreds of thousands of people around the world woke up on September 4th with a picture of Alan Kurdi's dead body on a Turkish beach. And I think it struck a chord with people because what we're seeing right now is one of the largest mass civil disobedience movements in the world. We're seeing millions of immigrants, migrants, refugees choosing to break through exclusionary and unjust borders in their search for freedom. And that's something to honor and to be inspired by. And in that process, 45,000 people have died crossing borders just in the last decade. And the scale of this is momentous, and I think Alan's death sparked an outcry that had just been bubbling under the surface. Here in Canada, since then, we've seen 51 actions being organized in 40 cities. And during this time, we've really been talking about what do we mean by refugees and welcome, right? So when we say refugees welcome, what we're saying is that first and foremost, the reason that people are displaced in the first place, the forces that force people to move, so war, capitalism, colonialism, racism, patriarchy, social oppression, the things that force people to move need to end. Right? We want to stop the war. We want to specifically, especially, stop the ways in which Canada, North America, Western Europe is actually complicit in causing displacement and forcing people to move, be it arms deals, be it like corporations like Nefsen who are using slave labor in Eritrea or Gulcor in El Salvador. So, and the climate change that is being furthered by Canadian interests such as the tar sands. And on the other hand, when we say welcome, we're not actually saying, oh, we should bring in hundreds of thousands of Eritrean and Somali refugees into this country so that they can be like criminalized by the police, racially profiled, and then jailed. Right? We're talking about an overhaul, a transformative system here at home, whatever home is for people. At the same time, we're not saying immigrants should come here and be part of a settler colonial state that has not done any truth or reconciliation and has continued to stay silent as thousands of women, Indigenous women, sisters have disappeared and been murdered. Land theft has continued. The legacy of residential schools, 60 schools, and now CES has continued. So it's really about a social transformative system. both in terms of international politics, immigration reform, obviously, because the entire immigration system is being taken apart. It's moved towards temporariness. We see, you know, parents and grandparents can't be sponsored. We see that refugee applications have dropped 50%, acceptance rates has dropped by 30%. So the entire system has actually moved towards more and more temporariness. So that's what Refugees Welcome is born in the moment. And now we've seen 50 plus actions in 40 cities. And what's really important is that it's now become quote unquote an issue, right? As if it wasn't an issue before for some of us. But it's something that mainstream media is paying attention to. The Harper government has been on defensive in the midst of the elections, whatever thing that's happening right now. They have actually re-promised for the third time that they will take 10,000 refugees, but they've made a number of significant compromises. I mean, nothing to the tune of the crisis, but it shows the Harper government is weaker. And now that these mass mobilizations have emerged, we really want to pitch the idea, and we want to support people into taking it a step further, to going into nonviolent direct action, to support Refugees Welcome, to support anti-racism, to call for a stop to the war, and to climate injustice. So we're here to really sort of talk about some things that people can do immediately, and we've created a lot of support system. There's a document on the screen that everyone can download, which goes through the steps that we'll be talking about today. Yeah, so that's Refugees Welcome. That's what we're here for, and we're really hoping we can make things happen today.
And I also just want to say that, like, Known as Legal has been around for about 13 years or so, which isn't that very long, but quite some time for a grassroots organization. And I don't think a moment like this has been felt, at least in the history of this organization. And so it's really exciting to see a lot of people who are self-organizing and want to support people in whatever communities they are to do the mobilizations they can. And I also want to say, like, I know that obviously there's a lot of energy around elections and et cetera, but like that when we're talking about the crisis, it's really not thinking about this particular government as being exceptionally bad, though of course it has done many changes. There's a link to the Never Home, which is like this multimedia cool web thing with lots of information about immigration changes. People want to know more, but the fact is, like, we firmly believe that Canada in its foundation as a state has always been founded on exclusionary immigration policies. The whole idea of stolen labor on stolen land, and so want to also remember that this is part of an ongoing legacy of how immigration is formed in this country. Anyways, we can talk a little bit more about specifics if you want, but I don't know. We talked a lot and really fast at you, mostly him, but
But if people have questions, they can Facebook or tweet us, I guess, or email us. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, definitely. We got a lot to cover, so I'll keep moving. But you mentioned there's been a bunch of different actions that have already happened, and I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about what kinds of actions have happened as part of Refugee Welcome.
Maybe I'll talk a little bit about what we've done in Toronto and then some of the other things that have happened in other cities. So there have been a few actions here in Toronto. Firstly was a rally we called in 24 hours, and about 1,000 people came out onto the streets. So it's definitely one of the bigger immigrant rights, migrant justice mobilizations, especially called in such a short amount of time, where we had various community members of different refugee communities come out and speak. So not only Assyrian communities, but also from Eritrean communities and from a variety of refugees, because that's something that we want to also talk about, is like which refugees get more kind of media attention. Why is it that a child, Alan's body that washes a sword, gets a lot more public interest and empathy than, say, months ago when we did a rally for the deaths of 300 mostly African migrants in Lampedusa? A couple dozen people showed up to that. And so that was also a reflection of kind of what is going on in terms of what is framed as crisis and what is not. And then since then, we did a big teach-in just this past week. So we did a rally and a public teach-in where we brought in different speakers to kind of talk about how their communities have been affected by immigration policies in Canada. What does Refugee Welcome mean to them? We've been doing kind of community meetings as well, trying to get a bit of a broader base support. And this coming week on Monday, we're doing a big rally because the federal leaders debate is happening in Toronto, run by the Monk School, or at least sponsored by, where Harper, Mulcair, and Trudeau will be speaking about foreign policy. And so one of the main things we'll be kind of coming together is thinking about how foreign policy is really things that affect our communities, affect immigrant communities, and it is about anti-war, it is about climate justice, it is about all the forces of displacement that push people out of their homes in the first place, not just the welcome part in terms of the Canadian so-called generosity piece.
Now, in terms of other cities, just briefly, as I said, there's been about 50 actions. So there's been everything from pickets to vigils to community forums to rallies and marches. If people go to our Facebook page, Known as Illegal Network, so facebook.com/Known as Illegal Network, we're keeping an album where we're regularly updating photos. And if people want to go to the website, refugeeswelcome.ca, and just type in your postal code and you'll find the closest action that's taking place near you. So there's still 8 actions that are coming up, and people are constantly putting up new ones. So it's all over the board, but what we've seen sort of like large mass rallies, and now we want to sort of encourage people to further their support and take the next step and to do creative direct actions.
So for folks who are tuning in, talking about creative direct actions, and a lot of the Shit Harper Did folks are into that, what are some ideas, or maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what you guys would like to see folks doing?
Sure. I mean, it's all outlined in the document, but there's 2 kind of concrete, really doable creative actions that we've identified, and also created a whole bunch of resources for people so that, it makes it easier to kind of try to do one of these. So the first one is a border blockade. And so the idea is to set up simulate a border blockade, create a banner with the border on it that is intended to basically block the MP campaign offices. So basically when the buses roll in and they're trying to get into their offices, create this fictitious border blockade with the banner and try to prevent them from entering the offices. And then we'll talk a little bit more about sort of the hows and whats and whatever, but generally that's the basic idea. And then the second one is a sing-along. So it could be like a sing-along in. Does that work? Like a sit-in sing-along? I don't know. But basically it's an action that actually folks in Vancouver had done, where there's a song around refugees welcome using like a popular tune. I don't know, when the something come marching in.
When the Saints come marching in.
Marching in, but it's like reframed as refugees are welcome here. And so in terms of organizing like a group choir as like a bit of a flash mob or whatever, those are 2 ideas we've come up with that I think would be really doable from smaller crowds to larger crowds, and we have a lot of the resources available to support folks to do that.
And so the border blockade, for example, could be done, it could be done as simply as standing onto a major street where people are passing by and simulating a border and doing it as a public educational, or people could like physically lock themselves to the doors of an MP campaign office so that the door can't be opened, in effect disrupting the MPs from campaigning, continuing as if it's politics as normal when thousands of bodies are dying. Similarly, the sing-along could be going into inter-candidates meeting or an elections rally that one of the leaders is holding and keep singing until you're being dragged out, or organizing a choir and taking to a busy intersection or a mall or anywhere where people gather and use it as a mass educational. So both these ideas can be escalated up and down based on people's desire and willingness to, and obviously their own like class and gender and race and immigration status, because I think those things will impact the way police and security state and the apparatus will impact us. And so yeah, we've outlined the different levels and scales in the document.
And I know with the conservative candidates, a lot of people have been noting that they're not really doing media, they're not going to debates, so actually going to their office and disrupting their office is actually a really good way to hold them to the fire a bit.
And obviously we are open to whichever party people want to block the offices of, conservatives or otherwise. We're not partisan in our approach.
All parties are open season.
Well, I mean, I don't think any of them have offered even remotely a transformative or a just or even a fair vision of immigration justice in this country, or real foreign policy that doesn't kill and murder and impoverish our communities around the globe. I mean, I think these are not exaggerations. People are literally dying by the day as a result of Canadian foreign policies and Canadian domestic policies. So yeah, take what you got.
Right. So talking about actions, and both of you have done quite a few and have been around a few, I wonder if you could kind of start walking folks through kind of what it takes to plan an action. Because that is more involved, and a lot of the folks might have the desire to do this, but how do you do it well?
It's referring to the document. let's start there.
Okay.
So we divided it up into three things, right? What do you have to do before, what do you have to do during, and what do you have to do after? And then you just talk about what to do before.
Yeah,
sure. Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to go too in the details, but one of the first things to do is terms of deciding where your action is going to be. In terms, if you're doing the campaign office, is to do scouting. So sending some folks out to the location prior to kind of get a sense of what's there, what are the entrances like, what are the roads like, what are the access points, just get a sense of what the lay of the land, as it were. So one of the things would be, go a few days earlier, around the same time that you would be doing such an action. You might, see an entrance, and you have to figure out how many people might you need if you want to effectively, say, shut down or prevent access into an office. Think about if there was going to be like a more escalated action around actually locking down to the doors and preventing full access, then what kind of equipment might you need? What kinds of door handles are they? Can you actually attach something to it? Those are actually considerations from like the small details to the kind of larger context pieces. And of course, like, do it in a way that is relatively discreet, right? You're walking around, you're not going to walk around looking like you're about to plan an action or anything like that, but so go in small groups, maybe a pair or something like that, walk around, maybe even go into the office, ask some questions, get a sense of what the place is like. I guess those are the main things around scouting. Do you do that?
No, that sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is you can take some photos and maybe draw a little map or Google Street View, things like that, but just be somewhat discreet about it.
Now, if you were, for example, scouting,
no, go for it.
Like, one of the things is Harper, Mulcair, and Trudeau are going on these buses across the country. So the buses pull into parking lots. So obviously, if you want to block the bus, you don't want to block it on a highway because then you have to block it on both sides. But if it's coming out of a parking lot, if you just want to get a sense of the physical space, finding the specific space where the bus is coming out of, so that people can actually stand in front of it, use a banner, and be able to block it. Or so that's one easy step, and then you move when you're told to. We've seen other people in different times in the world lock themselves to buses. I mean, buses have very large axles, but of course you don't want to lock yourself to a bus if the bus is switched on. So there are just different ways of being able to do that, and there's a lot of information about how to do it. But I think scouting is really about getting a real sense of the physical space, looking at a place and being comfortable with it before going to do an action. And it's not just Google Street View. I mean, by all means, use Google Street View, but there's nothing better than actually showing up.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the thing is also thinking about, the main thing is to obstruct certain flow than just thinking about where are all the possible places this can come in and where can they leave, what are the alternate routes, what's possible, and just trying to predict all the possible outcomes. If this, then that. If this, then that, and just kind of imagine. And of course, a lot of those things you can't imagine until you're in that physical space.
I'll give you an example. I mean, we were doing an immigration detention, and we went to Ottawa to shut down the Ministry of the CBSA offices, the Canada Border Service Agency offices. And when we rolled up, with this van, we had a 10 feet tall scale of justice that we would use to shut down their doors to show how it was massive and heavy, and 10 people took to assemble it. So we had a fully trained team, and we pulled up. There were cops there. Lots of them.
Like 50. Everywhere.
So we were like, okay, so what do we do? And we sort of looked at other buildings, and we found the Ministry of Public Safety, which is the ministry responsible for CBSA. We actually withdrew and actually set it up there. But obviously, they had entrance to another door, so it didn't quite work. But we were able to deploy it for just a short period of time. So I think having backup plans is always good. And and that means like scouting means that like, hey, if it's not working, let's leave and let's come back. Like no one knows your timing but you. So it's totally cool.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing is in terms of preparing materials, in terms of the pre-action, is if, for instance, you're doing the banner, the border blockade, is that you probably need something to help you block. So one thing we propose is like you could create a large banner, varying sizes. Most banners most fabric is 3 to 5 feet high, and you can make it as long as you think is necessary for that particular location. And we have a little, just like a sample, you could like project barbed wire, you could paint on. So it's symbolic, obviously, border, but those are some of the things you might want to prepare. If you're doing the sing-along, for instance, you'll have to prepare things like chant sheets, just as simple as that. People might have to rehearse a bit, and so you might need to prepare the lyrics so that people know and can follow along. Mm-hmm. But just basic materials, like there are other things in terms of like information material, like flyers, placards, posters.
Which can all be downloaded from refugeeswelcome.ca, so it's all pre-ready. It's in a box, just click download, print. But for other materials like painting banners, etc., people would have to do their own.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, in terms of the messaging on say if you wanted to do a banner, the ones that we've kind of come up with that have worked really well for a lot of the action so far, simple messaging is refugees welcome, no one is illegal, and open the borders. Has very clear messages around why would we be at these MP offices? What are some of the, demands? Mm-hmm. So we have a bunch of information on there around like what's the best way to, from projecting banners. Like, I mean, the things that, if you haven't painted a banner before, it actually saves you a lot of time, just to know how to do. And as we said, all the kinds of handout materials, social media material, like memes, images, profile pictures, whatever, it's all on the Refugees Welcome website. So there really isn't much of a need for you to create new stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's what we've tried to offer so that, to encourage you to get out there and just, have some fun.
Rolls?
Rolls.
Pre-rolls.
Pre-rolls.
You still do that?
Sure, go do pre-rolls.
Okay, so this is like, okay, so people have figured out the tone, right? Like, are we actually like locking down to the axle of a bus or a door, or are we doing a public sing-along? Are we going into an event or not? So you figured out the tone, you've scouted the location, you figured it out, you've prepared your materials, and now you got to put together a team, right? And a team is like your friends, your family, your colleagues, but it's only the people who are going to do the action, particularly if it's not a public action. I mean, if it's a public action and you're calling people to come and sing along, it's very different. But say we're talking about like nonviolent direct action where there's small people who need to know, then you need to just like figure out who's going to do what roles. So some roles to think about is who's actually going to be risking arrest, right? So in an action, you don't need everybody to be arrested. In fact, if you choose that, like any one person can like physically lock themselves into a thing if that's what they chose. Right, so who's going to be arrested? That's one role. Who's going to support them? So who are the people who are going to be standing around them? Who are the people who are going to like be the distraction? Who are the people holding out the banners, handing out the flyers, that kind of thing. And then if it's a public rally or something that a lot of people are passing, you might need an MC, someone to like tell people coming around what is going on, right? Hey, we're here because this government is responsible, or these parties are responsible for thousands of deaths. They've done nothing. The normal business of elections can't continue. We're shutting down this office for this day, for this long, etc. Next, you need a police liaison. Police liaison is someone who just talks to the cops, someone who looks like they can talk to cops, not us. And what a good cop liaison does is they get information from the police, they give very little information, and they don't make decisions. Like, this is really important. The police liaison should not be making decisions. So they can say to the cops things like, hey, we'll be here for just a bit longer, or hey, I'll go check in with people inside how long it would take, or to say, look, the office is already closed, they're already gone for the day, just let us be, just like whatever the police liaison does. Then you might need a media spokesperson, right? So we're going to talk more about media in a minute, but just somebody who's responsible for talking to the media. And then your documentation people, someone taking photos, someone filming. You want to protect your people, and that means filming and documenting it. So those are kind of some of the key roles that people have to divide themselves up. We've created a list that people can love. But it's good to sort of like, first figure out the roles, and then actually go through a practice run, like do it in someone's living room. Don't necessarily do it in the yard because it might look weird. Like, okay, so we'll walk in first, who will stand where? Okay, now let's practice opening the banner. All right, we'll start this, and then if this happens, and then talking through if this happens, then we'll do that, if that will happen. So thinking about it in a really creative, open, honest way, right? And not trying to like scare yourself into not doing anything, but just being realistic about what are the possibilities. But if people don't know what the possibilities are, that's what it is,
And it's also like, I think you mentioned earlier, but like a recognition of that different people can do different parts, different roles, and those, a lot of things are informed by like, how will the police treat this individual versus someone else in sort of more visible roles, or if someone has precarious immigration status, they might not be the one who gets arrested. So in terms of collectively, what are the people available and who can do what should be kind of like how the collective group can support each other the most. In pulling an effective action, but also making sure no one gets fucked over. Sorry.
Totally fine.
Totally. No. And obviously we've prepared some documents for knowing your rights around policing. I think policing is something people are really afraid of. I mean, as far as we're concerned, it's both moral and just and legal for people to be disrupting these forces. The police may not agree with us, so we've got some basic police rights onto the website. But obviously, this isn't about a confrontation with the police. It's about shutting down a particular form of what's happening in the world to make a particular point, right? So it's getting the message to government, getting the message to people through the media. Those are the two things. The police are kind of like a distraction over there. They just kind of like have to deal with, similar to like making a placard. So it's no more or no less important than your visuals say.
So media, do you have any questions? You want to jump in at any point? Let us know, because we're talking like extremely fast and excitedly, because just imagining that there might be lots of people out there who are interested in doing fun things.
I hope there are. No, you're giving some great information, so keep going.
Okay, cool. So media is a huge thing, both pre, during, and after. Lots of things considering media. So whenever you're doing action, you have to make sure people know you're doing an action. So it's not just like getting your people to come, but also getting the media to come. So sending out a press release days ahead, for instance, and on that having contact information, identifying a spokesperson, for instance. We've already drafted a press release. It's linked also in the document and also on our website. So feel free to modify as needed, but there's some kind of quotes there. There's some like national contacts, but feel free to use your local spokespeople and send that out. But of course, that requires having probably some contacts with local journalists and local media to kind of, you can pitch that to them if you're like, hey, this thing is coming up. Are you interested? So there's that personal aspect, as well as just kind of sending it to all the news desks. And then on the morning of, early in the morning of, making calls to be like, did you get this press release? Are you going to send folks over? And trying to make sure that people are going to show up, whether it's print or TV media, etc. We also have prepared a whole list of speaking points and also frequently asked questions that mostly Hussan collected from just like a lot of the public response, like what the hell is refugees welcome type of stuff. So there's a lot of written material for people if they need support around some of the main talking points, because the main thing in terms of doing spokesing for anything is that like oftentimes journalists will kind of try to throw you off course a little bit by asking you, a sideways question. So being able to practice it with people, your friends.
Should we try one?
No, we've done enough. There's a lot. We don't have time to try. And I mean, this is also not, it's like if there was a camera in front of me, it's like, sure, yes, let's go.
We can do theater. All right, never mind. Let's go.
But practicing is a huge part, because it's just basically whatever question they ask, you have your 3 points you are going to say. No matter what they ask, just say your 3 points, and you'd be like, that's a great question. What we really need to be doing, or what we need to be thinking about is X, Y, and Z. And so practicing makes perfect. It really does.
And I think like people think that like media is about answering the journalist questions, but really it's about speaking to the public through the journalist. And so it isn't, when you read a newspaper article or a TV show, you don't actually hear the person's questions. You just have your answers in that article. And so it's just really about saying your truth, saying it loud, and when you're done, saying thank you, and then moving away.
Do you want to talk about media during the action? Is that pre?
Well, I mean, I guess, okay, so in terms of like pre or post, like we were talking about like what kinds of action you're doing. If it's a surprise action, obviously you're not going to let the media know in advance. You're going to let them know once you're actually locked in and deployed. But if it's a more public action, you would let them know in advance. So we've, given timings and talked about how you could send out press releases during the action, how you would make calls during the action versus before. So just outlining the doc. And then in terms of during, during the thing is like when the media shows up, have your spokesperson ready, have them situated, and standing in a place that if they take a photograph, your action is behind them, and so that it makes part of the shot, so your messages will be clear.
And usually should be a person whose role is to handle the media, to set up that shot, so all that responsibility isn't placed on the spokesperson. So when there's a camera that shows up, there's someone already there to greet them, being like, where are you from? Like, who are you with? And then this is the spokesperson, set that up and help facilitate that and help get contact information, maybe a business card, so that you can follow up to make sure that whatever pieces they have, you can follow up with, and also just building relationship over time. If there are future actions of that sort, that they're like, hey, you did that piece, we're doing another action, are you interested in covering this? So that's really, it's really helpful for the spokesperson to be able to have someone kind of mediate. So that's mostly it. I mean, aside from the mainstream media, then there's obviously the social media aspect, which is like, you should have some people taking photos, video, and not just people who will take them, but people who will be willing after the action to edit them, to like put them up, to spread them around. So like that piece is really important, because there's a lot of people who can take video, but not a lot of people who necessarily can put out a video to get, and that's useful in a short amount of time. So we have to think ahead in the beginning. Is like, are there people who can, maybe extend in our networks in terms of like an act of solidarity? Like, we'll make a video for you for your action and line that up.
And I mean, you can always film with your phone camera and do a fairly decent video. The point is you have to stop and start as you go, so that it isn't a lot of editing. Like you can do, if you do a 10-second shot of the people and put that out, that's far more useful than like 10 minutes of shaky, moving around thing, which I think everybody generally knows. And what we'd encourage people to do is take those photos, get those videos, and obviously, if you don't want to put up people's faces, like take them in a way that people's faces aren't there, and then put it up. So put it up on Facebook, make a Facebook album, and then email us with the link to the Facebook album so that we can then spread it around, right? What we're hoping is between now and October 19th is like, hopefully dozens of these actions taking place, and we want people to like, just send us the media. Like perhaps you may not, because your action is a surprise, you may not tell us before it happens, but definitely tell us as soon as it's happened. So just keep us in mind. And our phone numbers are actually in the press release, so people can just call us if they have any questions.
Anytime.
Anytime. We never sleep. It's a fact. Okay.
That was really fast.
Sorry, and that press release, people can find the press release on refugeewelcome.ca?
And in the document.
It's in a document. We've laid out step by step what they need to do, pre-action, during action, media. It's all there.
And also, if there is an action that's more public that people are thinking of organizing, please upload it to the Refugees Welcome website. Anyone can add an action. It's just a really good way to get a sense of what's happening, and also other people can come through that. So trying to bring that together. So please do.
And then I guess the last thing would be, when you're done your action, it's not over until everyone's okay, right? And so that means everybody needs to come together, sit down, and maybe just after the action, everybody needs to come together, sit down and debrief, talk about what happened well, talk about what didn't happen well, just be open hearts, open criticism, whatever. And then after that, we just move towards, and then just debriefing, right? Just making sure everybody's okay, and then planning your next action, right? Like planning, okay, that worked great. So celebrate, debrief, plan, forward. That's it. That would be There we go. It's 43 minutes.
That's wonderful. That's very, very detailed. My computer was going to die, which is why I disappeared for like a hot second.
Oh, good. No one knows but us.
Oh, okay, great. Now everybody knows. So just for the folks tuning in, we mentioned a document a few times, and it's either on the screen or if you RSVP'd.
It's below us, right?
Yeah, can you actually see it?
Yes, it says please download, put tonight's
Perfect.
webinar.
Because there's also going to be an email going out to people who RSVP'd that will actually give you the link for that as well. I guess just one other question for you guys before we leave. Since we got started a bit late, we might give a few more minutes. A lot of folks, when it comes to actions, people who are sometimes watching this, they might not have taken one before, and they might have some fears and stuff around doing it. What gives you the courage to kind of step up and do the work that you do?
It's a hard one.
For the last one.
Last one. I need a moment to think about this. We must have an answer.
I mean, for me, first and foremost, we are, to me, I always remember why I'm doing this, and I'm doing this because of my friends and my family members and people I love and people I care about and humans around the world who are facing immense suffering and are because of the decisions that are taking place, in our backyard. And so I think there is a responsibility, and also that our freedom is brought up, our liberation is brought up together. So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is preparation. It's about following through with the steps. And then finally, I would say it's like knowing that people will have your back, right? Like solidarity and mutual aid are really fundamental to the work that we do. And so, I know that if I'm in jail, or if I'm hurt, or if I'm upset because of how things happen, I'll have my friends give me a hug or get me on bail or like show up and take care of me, and I know I'll do the same for someone else. And I think we need to build that culture of mutual aid, and I think with that, people will take all kinds of risks. I mean, I was somebody who was charged with conspiracy during the G20, and was possibly facing deportation, and people were willing to take year-long, multi-year jail sentences to make sure that that didn't happen. And so I think we have quite an inspiring set of examples where people take care of each other. So that gives me hope and courage, and yeah.
Wow, that's a hard one to follow. I mean, I think all this, but I mean, one of the things is in terms of how is that kind of trust or community or mutual aid, as Hassan was saying, built. I think a lot of it is through this fumbling process of doing actions, of planning, of organizing, of building out the movement, which is like most of the time pretty fucking hard, pretty exhausting. People leave, people, like totally, it's devastating sometimes, right? And people get deported. People die in detention. People, these things happen all the time, but actually actions like this and organizing things like this together help build that like knowledge that you will show up for each other.
And to remember, like, I'm sure we've done almost all of the fuck-ups possible in direct actions, right? And so one of the courage is like, it's not going to be perfect, right? It's going to be what it's going to be the first time, and the second time, the third time, the fourth time. So being prepared, and then like always having a plan B. If nothing else, you disrupted them for 5 minutes, if not for 15 days as you're planning to. But just like, be both humble but also like self-inspiring. And I think that hopefully the flood of images that start emerging with people across the country doing these actions will be what gives other people courage. So I really invite people to get started, because it's not about just the courage that they will find in themselves to do it, but also the courage they will like exude, hopefully, into other people seeing those and doing actions.
And I mean, I think it's connected to sort of one of the points, kind of bring it full circle, is this idea that, the images that we see oftentimes with migrants, especially in this particular crisis, is around a victim narrative, right? But the thing is, like, really thinking about these mass mobilizations, mass movement of people crossing borders, defying borders as an act of civil disobedience, and that's something that we are honoring and working in solidarity with. And the fact is that that people are in the millions asserting their freedom to move, and that's ultimately kind of the basis of our politics. Absolutely. That people should have the freedom to move, not only because they are being displaced, not only but that fundamental freedom to move. So
All those things.
What gives you the courage, Lala?
What gives me the courage?
Mhm.
Listening to folks like you. But
Oh, that's a cop-out.
Isn't that easy? That was easy. A lot of things. But thank you so much for actually everything you've just shared in terms of what inspires you and also the information. And I hope that people who are watching the webinar are similarly inspired to take actions in the next few weeks and beyond that, because this is going to keep going for a long, long time, right?
Can we stop it?
Yeah, and we're going to stop it soon, but
Yeah.
it's also we gotta keep it moving, right? Just to remind folks, if they want more information on migrant justice and on refugees welcome, www.neverhome.ca and then also refugeeswelcome.ca. Anything you want to add to that?
No less.
Call
And you
us.
can call.
Facebook, Twitter, we're around. Go
Right.
out, do your thing, give us a call. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye. How do you shut this?